Hi, everybody. Welcome to week 2 of Introduction to Sociological Research Methods. Oh, it's getting wild now. I want to just go through a few quick bureaucratic matters and then turn to the material for this week. I have received a few emails about deadlines. I want to reiterate the point that I'm being quite flexible with deadlines. So around a week after a lecture is posted, around that time, give or take a few days or whatever, you should post your responses online. As we get into more lab work and group work, you're going to realize that you're going to have to get to a little sooner if you're going to be on the schedule of your lab mates anyway. Incidentally, I've run into some obstacles with the labs, which is why we haven't had any yet. The TAs for this course, and there are two, one for each section of the course, they haven't been added to Blackboard yet. And so until they are added to Blackboard, I cannot yet set up group work or lab work. I have very quickly gone into Blackboard and set up some provisional random groups where there's basically groups of 3 or 4, maybe 5 in some cases, of you working together. And you'll probably see that in Blackboard, but I'm not going to make use of it until I have the TAs on board and ready to go. There will be a memo assignment for this week that involves some lab work. You're going to have to hold off on doing that until you receive an announcement from me about how and when that will be done. And I apologize again. I'm just waiting for the bureaucracy at Nipissing to admit the TAs into Blackboard so that we can set things up. But right now it's looking as though I'm going to pause the video for a moment while I bring this up. 1 second. It's looking like, okay, sorry, I know it's weird to have it cut and then all of a sudden, yeah, I don't know how that's going to look on video, but it's looking like one section of the course, and I'm not sure yet which section, will have some real-time group lab work with TAs facilitating it through Zoom on Thursdays at 2 p.m. For around an hour, probably a little less. And the other group, and again, I don't know which section any one of you will be in yet because I need the TAs to be assigned first, will be Wednesdays at 11 a.m. Okay, now some of you are thinking, I can't make that. And that's totally okay. These are going to be live sessions. They're not going to be recorded, but they're live sessions where you can voluntarily work with your group under the direction of a TA, and I may be present too sometimes. And that way you can sort of get some real-time advice from your peers. Now, if you and your group decide not to go to that time, you'll have to figure it out amongst your own group that will be listed. It's actually already listed on Blackboard as to when you will meet. But I strongly advise you to meet when the TAs are available because you're going to want to make sure you're going in the right direction so that not only your memos are right in the course and going in the right direction, but finally your research document, your research proposal, which is based off of these memos, right? So please try and make these if you can. Again, it's not a requirement, it is voluntary, okay? But I've only set it up just to help you guys. We didn't have to do it this way. Otherwise, your lab will be, again, set up internally between you and your group members, which you'll have to contact by selecting on their names on Blackboard. Okay, but there will be an announcement, hopefully very soon in the next few days about that. Okay, so let's get to, oh, there's one more bureaucratic matter I wanted to discuss with you. And that has to do with a number of the memos are talking about using mixed methods approaches. Inherently, there's nothing wrong with that. In an ideal world, it's good to use a mixed methods approach, right? It's not bad, there's nothing inherently wrong with it. However, given the constraints of our course, I would advise you not to choose a mixed methods. You can, but I advise you not to because mixed methods usually involves doing 2 types of studies, right? You're going to do a quantitative, then supplement it perhaps with a qualitative, or you're going to do a qualitative study, supplement it with a quantitative. Well, that's just too much, right? Especially for a course like this where we're trying to build a coherent research proposal that's doable, right? We want something that is doable. So I would highly encourage you to not do a mixed methods, and those of you who are discussing using mixed methods techniques to try and further refine this week, and I'll discuss that before at the very end of the lecture today, what your assignment is, your memo assignment. But while you're doing the memo assignment, I would encourage you to refine it and choose one side of the study only, if possible, okay? I think it's just for practical reasons that I'm encouraging you to do that. Okay, so that brings us to the lecture for today. I'm gonna get a bottle of water. Pause. Okay. So what I'm trying to do today really is to interrogate chapter 2 of the text. For those of you who are following along in the text, those of you who are not, totally fine. Chapter 2 of the textbook is titled The Research Process, subtitled A Quick Glance. The Research Project Process, A Quick Glance. Okay, once again, it doesn't matter if you have the textbook. If you know where to look, you can find it. So the author of the textbook is introducing us to something of his or her own invention. Okay, and what do you call, I'm gonna bring up whiteboard now. Here we go. What he calls it, I think it's a he, forgive me if I'm wrong, the 8-step, oh, I don't like the red font. It's too dramatic. It's too much passion. Let's go for a soft, relaxing font color. The 8 stages or processes, I'm gonna say the 8 phases to be consistent with this language. The 8 phases for carrying out research. Good, Hanji. So it's 8 steps, 8 phases, 8 hurdles that you have to pass through to carry out research from beginning to end, from alpha to omega, from the initial phases to the concluding phases, when you can finally say, I'm done. So it's a bit like a recipe, in a sense, for the author at least, and then once you go through all the various stages of the recipe, you finish cooking and you can eat. I don't like that analogy. Okay, so there's 8 phases, but these 8 phases are split into, or 8, Forgive me for a moment. I'm going to clear up the wording so that there's no difficulty here. So I apologize for those who have already taken the notes, but I'm going to call this 8 stages or steps for carrying out research. Okay. And within these 8 stages, there are 3 phases. Now you can see why I changed the words. So we have phase 1, and he calls that deciding what to research. I'm just going to list them all, and then we'll go through them, okay? And then within phase 1, there's 1 step. Step 1, formulating a research problem. Phase 2 consists of planning a research study. Oh my God, it's late here and I'm tired. Forgive me. And that there's 4 steps in this phase, which is step 2, conceptualizing research design. Step 3, constructing an instrument for data collection. Step 4, selecting a sample. Step 5, writing a research proposal. I nearly said proposal. That would have been terrible. There's nothing poopy about a research proposal. And then we have our third phase. So phase 1 consists of 1 step, formulating a research problem. Phase 2 consists of 4 steps, conceptualizing a research design, constructing an instrument for data collection, selecting a sample, and writing a research proposal. And phase 3 consists of conducting a research study. And that includes three steps. Step 6 is collecting data. Step 7 is processing and displaying data. And step 8 is writing a research report. Okay, this is what the author gives us. So again, you can see here, each phase is really made up of these steps here. Good, okay. Weird squiggly lines for no apparent reason. Good. So you can see from this list that I will go through in detail today, or a little bit of detail to give us an overview. And then as we go through the course, we're going to go into each one of these. But the author of our text has some presuppositions, a particular orientation for doing research. And the way I would put this, if I were making statements about his particular orientation, his bias, his particular viewpoint in in understanding research. Let's call this, oh, I'm going to change the color so it's not distracting. The author's presuppositions, okay, about research. If you were writing this all out, if you're taking notes, I would write the author's presuppositions about research. Well, first, it seems to me that I'll just type them and then I will explain what I mean. Okay, so I've noticed there may be more here, but just based off of this, what I'm noticing that from the author's presuppositions about how research is done, it's that first, there are discrete stages or steps or phases, if you like. Discrete, meaning they each stand on their own, right? Each step or phase stands on its own, apparently. It doesn't seem to be implicated in prior or preceding steps, right? So, so if you're formulating a research problem, that is distinct or discrete with respect to writing a research proposal. Those are two separate activities, and that's a presupposition that the author has, right? Second one is that it's pre-planned. I called it a recipe. It's articulated in advance. The whole research process, all the steps and phases seem to be articulated in advance because you can see the design is set up in such a way that it's as if it's a recipe in a cookbook. And then you're just a cook and you just have to follow the recipe. It's gonna turn out like a wonderful product. So you already know what you're making at the very beginning. You're a bit of a genius who already has everything prepared in advance and you simply need to kind of plug it in, right? And this is why I told you, I think last week, that it seems to me the author apparently sides more with applied methods and with quantitative or positivist, a word that I haven't defined here, but some of you may understand what it means in the context of sociology. Quantitative methodologies. He seems to be more aligned with quantitative, applied methods, deductive reasoning. These are words I'm going to explain more either by the end of today or the next class. So it's pre-planned. Let's move to number 3 here, sequential. a synonym for successive. In other words, it's clear that the author's design is such that he believes that research kind of moves from one phase to the next and so on. You know, it's all kind of moving one after another in sequence. Step 3 follows step 2, step 2 follows step 1, and so on. Sequential. So you don't, you know, there's no way to jump from step 1 to step 5. Formulating a research problem, now you're writing the proposal, or selecting a sample, and then you're writing your research report, or you're collecting data, then you go back and formulate your research problem. There's none of that in this recipe. You're not hopping around. If you're hopping around, you'd be doing something other than sequential work. You would be doing, I'm going to consider it an antonym, kind of the opposite. You'd be doing iterative. You'd have a more iterative design. Iterative means what? It means that you're constantly hopping around and redoing a stage, and then going to a later stage, and then that stage gives you insights to change another stage. So for example, maybe you collect data and now you're surprised by something and you want to hone in on it. So you decide to go back and completely reformulate your research problem yet again, a year later or a month later or whatever. You're always hopping around, refining. If you want an analogy, you can think about a person chipping away at a block. You're chipping away, you don't know what you're making, and then a form kind of emerges, so you go with it. And then by the time you're done, it's a bird. Right? It's kind of formless in the beginning, and you're just kind of making some guesses along the way. When I was a kid, I used to play an interesting game. This would be a game of iteration, if you like. I would just kind of create a mess like this on a sheet of paper, and then I just try and create something out of it. So I don't know, I'm just putting this here. Now I see that looks like an eye, so I'm going to draw like a mouth here. This looks like a wing, so I'm going to give it a wing. I'm going to give some legs over here. Look, it's like a bat dragon thing. Cool, right? But I didn't know what that was going to be at the beginning. Now, a sequential approach, I'm going to draw a cat. I know what I'm drawing, right? I know exactly what I'm drawing. This is not a nice looking cat. It's a very evil cat. And by the way, this cat has blood dripping from its teeth because it just bit me. So anyway, there's that. I'm gonna get rid of it. Okay. So those are 3 suppositions. Now let's move to the 4th, instructive. It's instructive because we're supposed to follow the supposedly follow the design directives. They're imperatives. You must do what is said here. It's instructive. So these are some presuppositions that immediately struck me as I was reading this, and I'm sure I could dream up more, but I just find it interesting that the author has these particular presuppositions. And maybe it's because it's a gentle introduction to research methods and methodology, methodological thinking. When you have a gentle introduction, having things pre-planned, having them discrete and sequential, and it being instructive, it gives you more comfort as a person who doesn't know what's going on yet. But if you're really courageous, be iterative. Don't be discrete. Don't pre-plan. Don't be instructive. Be a bit anarchist in your methodology. So again, I've done something that I think might be frustrating to some of you. I give you something clear. I give you something tangible, something relatively simple and coherent, this list, and then I subsequently problematize it. I introduce zones of confusion. I warned you, I think that I'm going to be doing this throughout the course. What I want to do is I want to treat courageous people by giving them room to be confused and to think and interrogate this stuff, while also giving you something tangible and concrete to hold on to so you feel like you got something. So I want to do both. If you're feeling more cowardly, and there's no shame in that, stick to the simple definitional stuff. Don't, this stuff here, don't face the confusions too much. Ignore me when I start opening up these confusions if you like. But if you're feeling courageous, open this stuff up, please. So let's explore the author's logic a little bit more. Okay. The author provides us with an analogy. I was going to write it on here. I think I'm just going to say it for now. He gives us an analogy. I'm going to read it to you, okay? If you have the text, you can find it in there. Otherwise, just, it'd be cool if there was automatic transcriptions. I'm sure there's an app to do that on here where it'll just automatically transcribe everything I'm saying. That'd be really cool. And then you can just extract the quote easily. Anyway, the quote is this. I'll read it in full and then I'll discuss it. Suppose you want to go for a drive. Before you start, you must decide where you want to go and then which route to take. If you know the route, you do not need to consult a street directory, a map. But if you do not know the route, then you need to use one. Your problem is compounded if there's more than one route. You need to decide which one to take. The research process is very similar to undertaking this type of journey. Stop there for a moment. Is it the case that research is like taking a drive? Well, I don't know about you, but if I already know where I'm going when I get in my car to go for a drive, then why the heck should I be surprised when I get to where I thought I was going at the end? Where's the novelty in that? I end up exactly where I planned to go. I've controlled the drive. So I already know where I'm going. All I'm doing is adding to the knowledge that I already knew. And there's no harm in that. There's a lot of benefit in doing confirmational studies and these sorts of things. There's no harm in this approach. But if the goal is novelty, which means discovery, then maybe this analogy is a bad one. If we always adopt a planned and a structured research methodology where it's designed in advance like a recipe, we shouldn't be surprised when we get the exact results that we intended to find, the results that we expected. Why be surprised? However, if we're interested in deriving new information from our research, innovations, surprises, and so on, we need to make more spontaneous decisions. We should go, I think, instead of going for a drive, we should go for what the cool kids back when I was a kid called going for a cruise. When you go for a cruise, it's a bit like what the French call somewhat pretentiously a dérive. You go kind of blind. And I do this every day when I'm walking and driving. You don't know where you're going, but you just start driving. And you have certain feelings and they move you in certain directions. And you say, I'm going to go a little bit in this direction for a little while. Something about that mountain over there. And then maybe you end up at the top of the mountain and you discover a beautiful new view of the city or something like that. I tend to prefer going more for a cruise. And you got to be a bit more courageous because it means lack of structure. It means more flexibility. It means you're more pragmatic. It means you make decisions more on the fly and so on. So to be clear, I'm making a distinction in this analogy here between, no, I don't want to share my screen. I want to create a whiteboard. There it is. Okay. I'm making a distinction between, this is a research analogy, between going for a drive, going for a cruise. One's more courageous, I contend, and the other one is a perhaps more comfortable. The author invites us to go for a drive. I'm inviting you to think that sometimes it's required and sometimes it's much more fun and interesting and there's more soul and spirit involved in the research if you're going for a cruise. When you go for a cruise, you don't know where you're going yet. You're opening yourself up to being surprised. Maybe you end up in Paris. It's amazing. Maybe you end up in a junkyard. That could be amazing too, or maybe it's terrible. Maybe you end up driving right into a river and you destroy your car, you destroy everything. That's the risk of going for a cruise. So I don't want to rule anything out in advance, okay? Often, though not always, within qualitative research, we tend to prefer taking cruises rather than drives. Often, but not always, in quantitative research, we tend to prefer going for a drive rather than going for a cruise. Okay, so that's about all I'll say about that nonsense. Let's move forward. I want to begin here with phase one. I don't know if you can see my spotlight. I presume you can. Phase one, deciding what to research, which brings us to step one, formulating a research problem. Am I calling them steps or stages? We'll say step, whatever. Step or stage, whatever. Step one, formulating a research problem. Yalla, okay. So what does this entail, formulating a research problem? Well, you've already kind of done some of this. I encouraged you to do something yesterday that none of you were prepared necessarily to do because I didn't fully give you any of the tools yet to really do it. And that's kind of the fun of it because you're forced to be a little creative. And I read every post so far. The TAs hopefully are going to take over with that soon. And I see largely everybody's on the right track here. 2 or 3 research problems or questions created in there. So when you're writing your research memo, that's basically what you were doing. You were beginning to formulate a research problem. You're in the initial phases of it. Formulating a research problem is the same, for the most part, as formulating a research question. Kind of using synonyms here. So like research problem kind of equals research question, but not really. Kind of does, but not really. Yeah. And I would also include here research objectives or objective. And these can be in the plural too. They're kind of all the same, but they're kind of different too. They're just a slightly different way of thinking about the same thing. And I think that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to approach it from multiple angles. And that's how refinement works. So formulating a research problem, basically the same as formulating a research question or formulating a research objective. Very close. We should try to decide somewhat in advance, at least as a point of departure, what answers we want to seek. But we should also be open to not necessarily seeking answers, necessarily. Maybe we're interested in opening up new problems. That's perfectly okay in social science or sociology research as well. You don't see a lot of it. I think we ought to see more, particularly at Nipissing. If that's your agenda, then just be clear about it up front. You're trying to problematize something through your research. Be clear about it. So perhaps what I want to know is my research problem. I'm going to put this in a different font or a different color just so that it's not too confusing. Okay, so example. Research problem. I want to know about the experiences of people involved in film making in North Bay, Ontario, Canada. Let's just say North Bay for now. Okay, so we have I have a research problem here. Just invented it kind of spontaneously. Okay, well, I would ask, what are the experiences? You know, how do I phrase that as a question? I'm going from problem to question. Research question. It's basically the same thing. What are the experiences of people involved in film making in North Bay? Slightly different take on the exact same thing. Research objective. basically the same thing, to discover the unique meanings and experiences held by people involved in filmmaking in North Bay. It's kind of all the same thing, but I'm saying it just a little bit different to comply with the word objective, question, or problem, right? So this is how you might brainstorm some things. So this is a preliminary research question. It's my research problem that I just kind of developed here spontaneously. Hopefully, if things go according to plan, I will refine this more. I don't know if I'm going to stick with this one, but maybe I'll refine it a little bit more later. But it's a preliminary and provisional attempt to define the scope of my research. Now, it's bound to be not very precise, or perhaps too precise right now. It's bound to be imperfect right now. And that's okay, because when you adopt an iterative approach, you realize that later on, I'll discover how I can make it more precise. I can come back and change it even more, change it more and more and more. And I'm going to show you in real time how that happens. As you become a more experienced researcher, you'll have the foresight, I think, to recognize that these phases and stages, like steps on a journey, are no longer steps, but rather functions that you can kind of call upon at whim at any time during the research process, and not necessarily in these discrete successive or sequential phases. Okay? So we have kind of two models right now, don't we? At least that I'm working with. Two models of research. I'm going to call it that. Why not? There's the authors, which is more like a drive, going for a drive. And it is discrete, it is pre-planned, it is sequential, and it is instructive. By contrast, there's more Dr. Foreheads. It's my superhero name. My son calls me that. It's more like going for a cruise. And, you know, if I'm being slightly biased, I would say that this is more comfortable. And this one over here is going to be more courageous. This is a more flexible model. I call this the flexible model, if you like. And it's this is how I would put it. I don't know. That feels good to me, so why not? It's fluid rather than discrete, more fluid, not just like it's one or the other. It's more fluid rather than more discrete. So rather than having each stage or phase of the research process stand on its own, discretely, distinctively, they can blend together and feed off of each other. That's what I mean by fluid. More pragmatic rather than more pre-planned or articulated in advance. So you don't have to plan all this stuff in advance as often, but you can kind of more work on the fly, more spontaneous, equipped with certain research know-how. The French call savoir-faire, a certain know-how. And I think that as you become a better researcher, you become more of a cruiser and less of a driver. Before you can cruise, perhaps you must drive a little bit. And I get that. It's more iterative rather than sequential or successive. You can bounce around among the various stages or phases of the research process as required by new discoveries, new possibilities that present themselves to you in real time. You can use that to kind of bounce around a whole bunch and repeat old stages and jump ahead and jump behind and so on. More adventurous or informative rather than instructive, which means you don't have to follow the design directives, but rather the design process is very often very much an attempt to thwart designing it at all. You're always trying to break out of any attempt to structure or authoritatively control the research process. So you're trying to break out of templates and recipes and instructions. You're moved by what you discover constantly, as if you were a child. So I'm going to return now to stage one again. Formulating a research problem or question or objective, however you want to put it. Okay. Well, we'll just simply say that research objectives are hopefully the goal of our research. It's the outcome, what we hope to achieve, the consequence. It's cash value, used metaphorically, the payoff, the expected contribution that the research can make, or its value. These are all ways to describe research objectives. Take, for example, my example study. I said the research problem concerns the experiences of filmmakers in North Bay. Well, the research question, and there can be more than one, what are the experiences of filmmakers in North Bay? Good. The research objective could be, if you like, if you want to develop it a bit more, it could be to obtain rich insight into the meanings and experiences, the world of filmmakers, and the unique benefits and challenges that they face within North Bay specifically. I'm kind of writing this whimsically, but I think you get my point. This is how I hope it can contribute to something. It's payoff, it's cash value, it's objective. So perhaps based upon that, I might be able to influence government policy, about zoning issues or bylaws, about such things as I'm just brainstorming, certain licenses that you need to film in certain areas and so on. I understand it's quite lax here in North Bay, but nonetheless, maybe I could develop a policy. Maybe I could develop campaigns to facilitate engagement with more diverse filmmakers, perhaps from other regions. How could we encourage them to come and film here? Things like that, for the purposes of economic development. See, I'm just kind of brainstorming, and this is the process you should be going through too when you're thinking about your unique research objective. So you can see how the research objective, the research problem, and the research question are all kind of related to one another. But nonetheless, you got to try and spell it out. You got to write it out. You might have it in your head. It's no good in your head. It needs to be stated, everything very explicit. You have to be very explicit. Write it out in all kinds of detail, okay? You're trying to use different words to say the same thing sometimes and to develop the same idea during this preliminary phase of the research process. Now, contingent upon this preliminary phase, you might get a better sense of the sort of paradigm or methodology that would be appropriate for your research. Will it be qualitative? Will it be quantitative? Or will it be mixed methods? Again, we're trying to bracket that mixed methods a little bit for our course, knowing that it does exist, knowing the unique challenges that it brings and the new perspectives that it opens up. We nonetheless want to bracket it just for practical reasons for the purposes of this course. But it is conceivable that a mixed methods approach could be in a design document here, but I would advise strongly against it once again. So, well, if I'm asking about filmmakers' insights into their experiences and the unique meanings that they bring to making films in North Bay, I'm not necessarily doing much counting here, am I? I'm not going to be counting trends. I'm not interested in relating variables or talking about relationships, what causes this to do that, and so on. I'm not thinking about probabilities. What is the probability that a filmmaker will come to North Bay? That's not my research question. Might be an interesting one too, but that's not mine. Mine is about the unique meanings and the lived experiences of filmmakers here. So I'm trying to find, I'm working with what seems to be meanings and words and textual data rather than numbers, right? So I'm trying to find meaning and words to articulate their experiences. So for this reason, it's most likely going to be a qualitative research methodology. I'm trying to identify themes among these filmmakers, certain key words, certain ideas that repeat themselves and that seem to be shared to some extent among the people that are identified in the filmmaking community that I'm isolating from my study. I want to get a fairly holistic and integral sense of their experience, right? So it's probably going to be a qualitative methodology. So, oh man. So I'm going to focus just on qualitative and quantitative for a moment without bringing in mixed methods, just to give a general sort of comfortable understanding of what you should be looking for when you're thinking about what your methodology is as being linked to your research problem. If you're looking at words, textual data, meanings, experiences, and so on, you're probably interested in qualitative methodologies. How, you know, you're interested in narratives, in what people say. That is, how they articulate themselves about something. That all seems to be very much on the qualitative side. Right? But if you're looking at things, and I mean, this is a really naive conceptualization, but I think it gives us some sense of what's going on here. If we're thinking about counting, numbers, trends, probabilities, statistics, relationships, sorry about the font overlapping with the other one, and so on, things like that, you're probably on the quantitative side, right? So I think that's good enough for now. It gives us a basic understanding of these two. I'd like to open up a diagram for you now, I think. Let me just bring it up on my computer first, and then I'll share my screen. Okay, good. So this is from the textbook, and he calls it the research process. You can see each phase here, each phase of the research process. The first phase, which includes one step, and you can see the one step down here, this number 1. I'm going to remark upon this in a moment here. Actually, I'll remark upon it now. You see all these steps have multiple arrows shooting in different directions. I find that interesting because it probably means that you can kind of lunge off in different directions from these steps if you're more courageous. I don't know if that's what the author meant, but it's there. Although he has these more sequential arrows beneath it where you move from stage 1 to stage 2, 3, 4. But you can see stage 1 here is listed within phase 1. Stages 2 to 5 listed within phase 2. Stages 6 to 8 listed within phase 3. Now in phase 1, which only has one step, it's formulating a research proposal, or problem, I mean. It has to do with deciding the scope of your research project. What are its research objectives? What are its research questions? What are its research problems? We're striving to answer these questions. What is our research about? What are we going to study? It's phase 1, and that's where we are in the course right now. We're really opening up this phase. We already began it last week to some extent, but we're in the middle of it now, right? Phase 2, you'll see, which includes steps 2 to 5, is planning a research study. Phase 1 is deciding. Phase 2 is planning. So it's the how. How are we going to do it? Deciding is the what. What are we going to study? How in phase 2 are we going to study it? So we're really planning here. We're planning much more. We're planning the technique of our study, our protocols and so on. It answers the how question. How will you conduct this research? Stages 2 to 5 are all about designing aspects of the research. It includes conceptualizing a research design, constructing instruments or protocols for data collection, thinking about sampling. Sampling means the people who will be involved, or the elements or data pools that will be involved in our research. Phase 3 is collecting. I would have called this the doing, but maybe even the do-doing, depending on what part of research you like the most. Just the do-doing. Oh my God. It's only 8:42. It feels like 3 in the morning here. Okay. This includes stages 6 through 8. And this is where you're really applying it. You're plugging it in to the world. It doesn't ask a question in the because it's not an attempt to generate answers. It's an attempt to collect information, to assess the information, to analyze it, to display it, to write about it, and to publish it. So that's phase 3. The important part from step 1, phase 1, is that we finally get some sense about whether this will be a qualitative or a quantitative or a mixed methods approach, right? This could change, but we really hope in some sense that it doesn't change. By the end of this week, I really hope that you have a fairly firm sense as to what your research, the scope of your research is. You want to really kind of finish phase 1 to some extent this week. If you don't, it's okay, but we should really be on the direction of finishing it and coming up with some sort of research problem, objective, and question, and understanding if you're going to be doing a qualitative or a quantitative or possibly a mixed methods approach by the end of this week. But really in phase 1, it's okay to not understand everything at the beginning too. So leave room for that, okay? Well, let's go a little bit more in depth, although I already kind of did, on the qualitative and quantitative distinctions according to the different steps in the research process. It doesn't hold true for all cases, but it does give us a basic sense. So I'm going to open up another chart. This is also from the textbook. And I'm not going to go through it in detail. I just want to show it to you. So I hope you can see that. It's just like a compare and contrast of qualitative and quantitative. It's a really broad view. The operational steps and the qualitative and quantitative distinctions. So what we will do is we'll go into more depth with these as we move through the course and as we move through the chapters of the book. But I really hope you're beginning to see that we are being a little bit more iterative in our approach. I keep going over this stuff more and more. But basically what you see here is that I'm gonna neglect the underpinning philosophy. I'll save that for one of my long tangents and one of my theory courses maybe. But basically you can see a quantitative research project tends to approach its research problem or inquiry in a more structured, rigid, predetermined way, whereas qualitative tends to be more unstructured, flexible, more open in its methodology. Quantitative its main purpose tends to be to quantify the extent of variation in a phenomenon, situation, or issue, whereas qualitative is describing in words. You can see quantify means counting, describing means there's meaning or words, to describe variation in a phenomenon, situation, or issue, etc. Sample sizes tend to be much larger in quantitative, but not always. Whereas in qualitative, your sample tends to be much smaller, though again, not always. What else do we have that we should look at here? Yeah, I would just remark upon this last one here, how we communicate the findings in the final phases of the research process, the final step really. The quantitative stuff tends to be organized, a much more structured paper with less rich descriptions, you know, more charts, and there's a very short description section, very short conclusions. There's not a lot of words and so on. It just kind of gets to the point, the BFD. Whereas qualitative tends to be more creative in the way that it's published or presented. It can be much more creative, more descriptive, and there's more narrative, there's more prose, there's more commas and semicolons and quotation marks and so on. Okay. And of course, these rules are quite flexible. I'm just going to quickly go to discuss step 2. Which is in phase 2, conceptualizing a research design. And again, we're going to go more into depth on this stuff later. If you're starting to feel exhausted, now could be a really good time to pause the video and take a short 15-minute break. Or if you feel like it, an hour break, a few hours, just as long as you finish the video before the next one and you get your, and you give yourself enough time to do the assignment, because you need to watch the whole video before you do the assignment too. Okay, but you know, try and finish the video within at least 24 to 48 hours. Okay, moving along. So in step 2, we're really looking at ensuring that we are using the right techniques and methods, and protocols is a big fancy word, we'll discuss it later, to satisfy our unique research objectives. So designing involves thinking about these issues. How are we going to find answers to our questions? We design our research in such a way that we ensure the validity, we ensure that there will be rigor, and we ensure that we are using reliable methods and so on. And it's likely that our final document in this course will be an attempt to work through and design this study, right? So we're going to be passing through stages 2 in this course. All the steps involved in phase 2. Not so much the steps involved in phase 3 though. Step 3 is constructing an instrument for data collection. You guys know that song by New Kids on the Block, NKYOTB? Step 1, step by step. I highly encourage you to, if you're gonna take a break now, take a break, go listen to Step by Step by New Kids on the Block. That was my cut, that was my jam when I was a kid. All right, step 3, constructing an instrument for data collection, otherwise referred to as a protocol. I often refer to it as a research protocol. Basically the same thing. You could say research instrument. It's really sophisticated ways to say something that's very simple, which researchers are extremely good at doing, making things sound much more technical and precise than they actually are in reality, but this is our task. The instrument, when we're talking about the research protocol, the research instrument, we're talking about how, like the instrument that we're going to use to gather the data. I don't mean an actual device. I mean our surveys or our interview questions or whatever they may be. We'll discuss it when we get to it, okay? We could be observing a population, for example, and taking notes. We might be having focus groups. There's all kinds of different methods, and we're going to get to those methods soon enough. We need to decide, though, how we're going to collect our data. And this depends entirely on our research orientation, our research questions, our research problem, our research objectives, and our research paradigm, qualitative or quantitative. Qualitative and quantitative methodologies have different instruments or protocols that we can use for data collection and different modes of assessing that data. So we're going to be looking at those as we move forward. Hanji. Step 4, selecting sample. I just realized that I was talking Hindi. Sorry about that. I'm going to practice my Hindi, I guess, with you. Selecting a sample. Not only do we need to recognize what our pool of data is, but we need to figure out, is it extracted from text, from newspapers, from documents, from people, from policies? Where's the data coming from? Is it people? Is it documents? Are we going to be analyzing policy documents? Are we going to be analyzing responses from people, things that people have actually said? My son, are you okay? Don't eat the whole thing, okay?
Okay.
You just have like 3 pieces of chocolate from it, not anymore, okay?
Okay.
All right, you want to come say hi to my class? Be quick, this is a video and we don't want to take.
Hi. I've been on his channel, but not in one of his videos.
Okay, love you.
Love you.
Okay, so what are we going to be extracting our data from? What is our data set made of? Is it made of people? Is it made of words in a document? What is it made of? We need to think about that, and we'll think about that when we get to this section. I'm just giving you a broad overview right now. Often we want to try to select a sample that can give us a wider picture into our research problem, right? If I want to know about the experiences of people in the film industry in North Bay, I want to know about all of them. Yet I can't possibly talk to every single person involved in the film industry. I can't talk to every one of them. So I have to be thoughtful in how I select my sample, the people that I will talk to. I need to select a sample size that can give me a window into the picture of a lot of them. The ability perhaps to somewhat generalize my conclusions with some degree of probability, perhaps, something like that. Do I have a smaller group, larger group? Do I have a case study? You know, how am I going to do this? So those are some of the issues that we'll address when we get there. For now, we have 3, I would say 3 categories of sampling design, just to give you a bit of a view as to where we're going to go here. No, I wanted you to be green. It's very bad. 1, 2, ek do teen. Practicing my Hindi. Okay. 3. 1, we talk about a random or a probability sample. Many of you have heard these expressions before, I'm sure. That's cool if you did. I don't know what's going on here. There we go. Okay. Random or probability sampling. That's 1. We can talk about non-random, non-probability sampling designs. And we also talk about mixed sampling. So you're going to hear these words a lot. I'm hesitating to define them right now. I don't want to bombard you with too much this week. Just hear the words and know that they have something to do with sampling design. And you can probably guess that a random sample means randomly selecting people. Non-random means selecting people because you're choosing them for particular reasons. And a mixed, well, we'll leave that for now. This is just a little insight into where we're going. Then we have step 5. Oh, mama. Writing a research proposal. This is our final step in this course, I think. I think this is where we're going. And this is the final one in phase 2. Writing a research proposal. Again, it's most likely where we're going to conclude the course, although we're going to have other material to talk about here. We want to write a research proposal or a research design document. I mean it as basically the same thing. It's our main document. We're working toward this step largely, step 5. It's a document that outlines all of our forethought on research problems, that allows other researchers, other participants, ethics committees, and I'll discuss that in the future, our supervisors, our professors, and so on, maybe the public, to better understand our project. It can give us all a sense of validity and reliability concerning our project, among other things. In many universities, there is a research ethics board. It goes by various names. Here at Nipissing, we have the REB, the Research Ethics Board. Most serious universities do have this. And they will discuss your research proposal. You submit it to them, they discuss it, they'll approve or deny it before you can ethically be said to conduct that research. At the last university I taught at in Mumbai, very good university, but they didn't have a research ethics board. Not really a concern for them. And that cross-cuts most of India, if I'm being honest. So it was actually my goal to set one up, and I did begin the initial phases of setting up a research ethics board, research ethics committee there, which had members from all different disciplines who were interested in the ethics concerning the methodology, not the topic, and not helping in that way, but simply, is it something that is a viable project? 2, can it harm anybody? And have you thought about all the ways it can harm people and so on? So it's typically at the institutional level, it's a liability thing too, right? We're lucky at NU that we have one here. We can discuss it further as we get to that section of the course, but for now you could go to, if you're interested in just having a quick look, and I encourage you to just have a quick look at this website, nipissing.ca/research/ethics. I wish I could make this a hyperlink that you can just click on right now, but if you have Google Lens, you can just copy it and paste it. Otherwise, just go to the website /research/ethics, and you can see what's up there. They are involved briefly in green lighting, checklisting your project, looking at your research protocols and so on. And once they conclude that it satisfies all of the ethical requirements, you get the green light and you can go. But you have to fill in some forms and submit some documents that they can assess. Okay, so I return to the research proposal. Really, the research proposal document The research proposal document should include such things as your research question, problem, objective, and these could be plural. It could be questions, problems, objectives. If there are hypotheses, may not be, that tends to be more of a quantitative thing, but not always there either. If you're doing qualitative research, there might be such things as reflexivity statements, and we'll discuss that as we move through the course. But right now, I'll just tell you that it has something to do with reflecting upon your own presuppositions, your own biases, and your own reason for doing the research, and how you're situated in relation to the participants, and so on. It should include things like your study design, the setting of your study, of your research, where you're conducting it, your research protocols, instruments, sampling design, sampling strategies, analysis techniques, data processing techniques. Some of these words all kind of mean the same thing. Proposed chapters, sections, a final document. The time frame for proceeding through research phases, problems and limitations of your study, things things like this. I'm just kind of brainstorming. These are some of the possible things that might be in a research proposal. You will get most of the essential components as you move through this course, and we'll discuss pretty much everything that I've just listed. And, you know, research proposals are quite flexible. They could have other things in there, and they might not have some of the things I've just mentioned, okay? Okay. Then that brings us to phase 3. And step 4 is collecting data. And collecting data, I mean, this is actual implementation of your data collecting techniques and what you've outlined in your design document. Maybe you're mailing out surveys to people, for example. Maybe you're leading a focus group. Maybe you're now in the field observing people, but you're doing it now, and you're not just talking about how you're going to do it. You're actually doing it. You're actually mailing out the surveys. You're actually going out and interviewing people. You're actually observing people. And you're actually looking at policy documents and so on. Maybe I'm out interviewing filmmakers and reviewing the government websites on filmmaking and all the different film companies that are here and so on. I'm exploring how it's described in terms of its geographic location. Perhaps for my project. Why did I write step 4? I'm so sorry about that. That's step 6, I believe. Yeah, so 6. I'll just kind of go like this because I can't erase it. Hopefully you get it. All right. Step 7, apologies for that. Processing and displaying data. Okay, this is where you're analyzing. Don't worry, I'm getting very close to the end here, okay, guys? You can tell anyway, one of the wonderful things about YouTube is you keep going down and checking how much time is left while the video is playing. You can't do that in the classroom, right? And so some of you obsessionals in there, you're like, okay, I just have to sit through this much more or whatever. And that's something I don't like about YouTube, but it comes with the terrain. Processing and displaying, you're not going to do it in this course again. We won't actually conduct research, but depending upon the nature of your research, you may be reading a text and looking for themes, and we call it coding in qualitative research, coding, looking for themes and categories of themes and so on to sort of develop a theory of what you've extracted from the data. And this approach is quite prevalent in one method called grounded theory, which we'll discuss in this course soon. Maybe you're crunching numbers and displaying them in charts, pie charts, or multiple factor analyses, or other visual forms of displaying the data. That's possible too. But the point is you're actually processing it, you're actually displaying it, and you're getting close to step 8. 1 2 0 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. Listen, I'm impressing nobody with my Hindi. Step 8. So you're writing it, and hopefully all the different projects are going to look quite different from one another. We don't want them to look too much the same. Quantitative, they're going to be more templated, and I get that, so that's okay too. But really you're trying to write it and hopefully try and publish it out there and get it out into the world somehow. Maybe it's possible your goal is not even to write a final report. Maybe you're just writing about what you finally did. Maybe you want to just do something and that doesn't involve writing. There's lots of flexibility here, and a lot of qualitative research. What you might do at the end, it might be some sort of communal gathering, or it might be that you've produced a new thing in the community, and maybe you could still write about it, but the writing is incidental. The real payoff isn't in the publication, it's in the thing you've done for this community, something like that. That's a possibility too, and we don't want to close that out. Okay, so that ends a broad overview of the recipe, and it brings us to your memo assignment for week dull 2. For this week, I want you to revisit last week's memo. Being iterative. And what I want you to do is choose one research question, I'll say one set of research question. How can I phrase this? Choose one research question, which includes the problem and the objectives. Okay? Choose one of them from the 2 or 3 that you've selected. You're just going to be rolling with one of them now. Okay? Next, I want you to rewrite it entirely. I don't want it to be written the same as what you wrote before. I want you to write it completely different with the same underlying idea. Define it again. Provide reasons why it will be qualitative, quantitative, or mixed methods. Okay. So you're doing basically the same project again, only you're going to do it more in depth. You're just focusing on one, and you're going to stick with that one and kind of develop it more fully. Saying the same thing, but maybe you're saying new things and refining it a little bit, rethinking it a little bit, given what you've learned now. Once you do this, I want you to join your group, and I've explained how. There will be an announcement soon with a Zoom link so that you can go live at a particular time with your group and the TA. However, if you and your group together on your own decide to meet on your own time, you can do that as well. But you have to join your group. Please understand that the announcement is coming hopefully in the next day or 2, so you're not going to be able to act on this just yet. Okay, but join your group, hopefully with the TA and the other students in the live session, if possible. And I want you to exchange your memo with another member of the group. Okay, discuss the memo and obtain feedback from the other in your group. Okay, and so I want you to collect that feedback. I don't need you to write anything about that feedback yet. Okay, I don't need there to be any writing or anything like that. I just want it to happen. So you collect it, keep it on your own, obtain the feedback, include it in your posted memo, but you don't have to respond to it. You understand? So let me go through this again so you're fully understanding, because I feel like I'm being a little convoluted here. Go back to last week's memo. Choose one research question, which includes the problem and the objective and the methodology, qualitative or quantitative, for example. Rewrite it entirely. Explain everything all over again. Now take that memo with you to your group. When you get to your group, exchange it with another member of the group, and have at least that memo, that other member, and maybe the other members of the group discuss it with you. Collect that feedback and jot it down into a memo. You don't have to respond to the feedback. I just want you to collect that feedback and have it with you, okay? Don't post your, I guess I should write this. Do not post memo on Blackboard or wherever until you've finished steps 1 through 5, just listed here. Until you've revisited, chosen one, rewritten it, exchanged it with members of your group, and received feedback. Once you've done that, then you can post it with the feedback. It doesn't have to be pretty. It can be a diagram. It could be, you know, I saw some amazing stuff that you're doing. Some people are posting post-it notes with columns, and other people are drawing it. Some people are using bullet points. I'm really impressed at your creativity. Don't be afraid, again, to be idiosyncratic and eccentric about this. I really like that. Don't go too far off the wall here. We want it to be something, something understandable, but nonetheless, you can do that. Okay. Make sure you include the names of the students who provided you the feedback in your memo, okay? So it sounds like a lot, it's really not. It's just I'm trying to be very precise in what you have to do, but it's not a lot to do if you really consider it. That's it. If you have any further questions, feel free to post it in the admin section of the Blackboard, and I will answer it just as soon as I can. If it's a bit more urgent, email the question to me, and that's fine. If you have any questions that you think I may have already answered, please go back and try and find the answers in the video first or on Blackboard, or ask another student in your group if you've made contact yet before emailing me, because I am getting hundreds of emails from you. I'm trying to stay on top, but it's difficult. And then bring it to me, okay? Thank you so much. I will talk to you all soon.